Hello everyone, it's Frank again with another budget mud truck video. Today I will be fabbing, prepping, painting, and installing a brush guard and a bumper on the budget mud truck. So the first thing I did was clean the bumper. I bonded all the plastic mount points and then I sanded everything down and began painting. I sprayed a couple layers of sandable primer, followed by some sanding, followed by the actual paint. Now, there's probably some of you out there thinking, I could have sworn the budget mud truck had a bumper and a brush guard. Well, you would be right. It did have both of those things. Problem is, the bumper on the budget mud truck was dented pretty badly on one side, and you can really tell there had been an accident. As for the brush guard, I really like the brush guard on the white donor truck. It's clearly more heavy duty, mounting directly to the chassis, not just the bumper. And it also didn't have little bars crossing in front of the headlights, which I really did not like on the previous brush guard. I also decided that if I was going to be painting the bumper, I might as well remove the plastic piece it has, which would give me a little bit more clearance for when I add larger tires. Which is why I had to bond out so many little holes in the bottom of it. Once the bumper was ready, it was time for the brush guard. So this is where the fab work comes in. I liked the brush guard, but I wanted to add some extra lighting to it. So I took the 4 lights from the roof rack on the white donor truck and decided I would mount them in the middle of the brush guard. Seemed like a good idea at the time and looked pretty good. I would just have to weld some tabs onto the brush guard to mount the lights on. So I began working on the tabs. As you can tell, these holes are extremely close to each other, and because of that, I ended up having to remake these off camera. It was basically the same process, just the holes were further apart from each other. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, I also didn't get the welding of the tabs on camera. But don't you worry, later on in this video there will be welding, so you can get your fix there. As you all know, the budget mud truck has a 3 or 4 inch body lift. The white donor truck did not. So when I went to mount the brush guard, it was about 3 to 4 inches too low. So I had to figure out a way to mount it on the budget mud truck. After a lot of measuring and even some CAD work, I came to the conclusion that cutting off the mounts and welding on new mounts was probably going to be my best bet, both for strength and for future ease, as I will like to add a winch to it eventually. Once the old mounts were out of the way, it was time to begin making the new one. The concept is pretty simple. Start with a flat piece of metal, drill 2 holes in it, cut the flat piece of metal into 2 flat pieces of metal with a hole on each one, weld a nut to each of those pieces on the hole, then weld the 2 pieces to the brush guard on their respective sides. This was probably the worst day of filming ever. My camera overheated several times, so I was only able to get footage of welding one of the 2 nuts. At this point, I measured the new mounts up against the brush guard and decided to trim them down a little bit so they fit better. Cleaning up a little before welding. Now I welded the new mounts on the brush guard, making sure the nuts are on the inside. As you can see, the first test fitting wasn't great, so I ended up having to cut off some excess metal from the brush guard. The 2 bolts that went from the chassis to the mounts I made were lined up pretty well, but the bolts on the actual bumper were still a little off. So I brought in a ratchet strap, and that got it much closer. In the end though, I still had to drill out new holes for 3 of the 4 bolts that go into the bumper. You will notice I no longer have the 4 lights from the donor truck's roof rack. That is because when I went to test them out, I quickly discovered they were spotlights, which really are not all that useful for what I wanted them for. So I ended up buying a cheap light bar on Amazon to put in their place. Overall, I was pretty happy with how it all came out. The brush guard is much stronger than the one I had before, the bumper looks a lot better, and I have more clearance. I also really like that it left me the ability to mount a winch later on as well. As always, if you like this kind of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any questions about anything I did in that video, leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching.